There's something that follows you. You feel it when you're alone, when the noise of the world fades away and it's just you facing that mirror that reflects more than your face. It's that part of you that you hide, the one you deny, the one you silence when someone asks, "How are you?" And you answer, "Fine," even though chaos claims its throne within. Carl Jung called it the shadow, that reservoir of everything you refuse to be. But perhaps, and this is the paradox that will change your life, perhaps your deepest purpose isn't found in what you celebrate about yourself, but precisely in what you've buried beneath layers of denial. This isn't another motivational talk. I won't tell you that everything will be fine, because before something can be fine, much has to be uncomfortably exposed. Today, we'll immerse ourselves in Jungian darkness, and I warn you, once you see what's there, you can't unsee it. Have you ever caught yourself harshly judging someone for a flaw that, secretly, you also possess? That moment of inexplicable irritation when someone shows weakness. That visceral rejection towards someone who exhibits a trait that you, in the solitude of your room, also manifest. It's no coincidence. It's your shadow screaming. Jung understood that what disturbs us most about others is, almost always, a reflection of what we don't want to see in ourselves. When you were a child, you quickly learned which parts of you were acceptable and which you should hide. Perhaps your curiosity was labeled as bad manners, or your sensitivity as weakness, maybe your anger as lack of control. And so, fragment by fragment, you exiled entire parts of your being to that nameless territory, the shadow. But what you bury doesn't die. It transforms. It grows in darkness, and it finds ways to manifest, often destructive, sometimes prophetic. The shadow isn't solely your primitive impulses or your defects. It also contains your unrecognized talents, your most authentic desires, your rawest truths. It's everything you decided not to be in order to fit into the narrow mold the world had prepared for you. The first Jungian paradox. What you fear most about yourself might contain the seed of your greatest strength. Think about the last person who awakened an inexplicable rejection in you. I'm not talking about someone who concretely harmed you. I'm talking about that individual whose mere existence irritates you, whose way of speaking, laughing, occupying space becomes intolerable to you without apparent reason. Jung would say, there's psychic gold there, because in that irrational aversion lies a projection of your own shadow. The mechanism is as simple as it is devastating. What you cannot accept in yourself, you project outward. You see it amplified in others. You fight it externally to avoid dealing with it internally. That colleague you consider too ambitious perhaps reflects the ambition you repressed out of fear of failure. That person you judge for seeking attention might be showing you the visibility that you yourself crave, but fear to claim. The second Jungian paradox. Your harshest judgments of others are doors to your unintegrated aspects. And here's the uncomfortable question. What would happen if every time you felt a disproportionate rejection towards someone, instead of feeding that judgment, you asked yourself, what is this person touching in me? This isn't an invitation to tolerate the intolerable or to justify harmful behaviors. It's an invitation to distinguish between reflective judgment and the visceral reaction that signals a projection. Because every unrecognized projection is a part of you that remains in exile. And the more extensive your shadow territory, the less space remains for your authentic self. Do you remember that recurring dream where something or someone is chasing you? Jung saw in these dream pursuits a symbol of the distance between your conscious self and your shadow. The more you flee from your denied aspects, the more threatening they become in your dreams, in your relationships, in your crises. The encounter with the shadow is rarely planned. It usually occurs when life corners you, when you lose that which defined your identity, a relationship, a job, a belief, when the mask you wore no longer fits, or worse yet, breaks in front of everyone. It's that moment when you discover yourself acting exactly as you swore you would never act. When you hear yourself saying the same phrases that hurt you coming from others. Jungians call this shadow inflation. It happens when the repressed accumulates so much energy that it finally erupts, temporarily taking control. You've seen this in others. The perfect person who has a public breakdown, the moralist who falls into scandal, the implacable judge who is caught in their own contradiction. The third Jungian paradox, what you most refuse to control, is precisely what will eventually control you. The real work isn't to perfect yourself to the impossibility of erring. It's to integrate your dark aspects before they take control for you. And here, we arrive at the crucial point, the voluntary encounter with the shadow. Don't wait for your shadow to find you, usually at the least opportune moment. Turn and look it in the eyes. Ask it what it wants to tell you. What happens when you stop fighting your shadow and start dialoguing with it? Jung called it the individuation process, that path through which you recover the fragments of yourself that you abandoned along the way. Not to identify with them, but to consciously integrate them. But attention. Integrating doesn't mean impulsively acting out every shadowy aspect. It's not a license for chaos. It's recognizing those impulses, understanding their origin, and transforming their energy into something constructive. The artist who channels their rage into creation instead of destruction. The leader who recognizes their hunger for power and uses it to serve instead of dominate. The sensitive person who transforms their vulnerability into deep empathy instead of victimhood. They are all integrating aspects of their shadow. The fourth Jungian paradox. Your deepest wound and your greatest gift are often two sides of the same coin. When you allow yourself to see and accept your shadow, something strange happens. That aspect you so feared shows its luminous reverse. Your hypersensitivity, which you always considered a weakness, reveals its capacity to perceive nuances that others don't see. Your tendency toward isolation, which you judged as antisocial, shows its potential to cultivate a depth that superficial connections would never allow. Your emotional intensity, which embarrassed you, reveals itself as the source of your capacity to feel and create with extraordinary depth. Do you begin to see the pattern? In each rejected aspect of yourself lies a dormant potential, a raw force that, refined by consciousness, can become your greatest strength. Perhaps you've searched for your purpose in the usual places, your evident talents, your achievements, your recognized virtues. But what if your true purpose were intertwined with what has been hardest for you to accept about yourself? Jung observed a fascinating pattern. Often, people find their most authentic calling precisely in the territory of their greatest wound. The child who grew up in an emotionally distant family develops an exceptional sensitivity to the unexpressed needs of others. The person who fought against their own darkness develops a unique capacity to accompany others in their own personal hells. The one who knew rejection develops a gift for creating spaces of belonging. The fifth Jungian paradox: your greatest pain, when consciously traversed, can become your most significant contribution to the world. This isn't romanticizing suffering. I'm not suggesting that trauma is a requirement for purpose. I'm pointing out that what has forced you to deepen, to question yourself, to rebuild yourself, contains a wisdom you wouldn't have acquired otherwise. The invitation is clear, but challenging look toward that part of your history that you've wanted to erase, that aspect of yourself that you've tried to silence, that tendency you've judged as unproductive or problematic. Ask yourself, what wisdom is there? What unique perspective does it offer me? Whom could I serve precisely because I understand this dark territory from within? Beyond the personal shadow, Jung identified universal patterns he called archetypes, primordial energies that inhabit the collective unconscious and manifest themselves through us. The hero, the sage, the creator, the caregiver, the rebel, the explorer. Each represents an archetypal path toward purpose. The fascinating thing is that each archetype contains its own shadow. And it's precisely in the integration of that tension where its maximum potential is revealed. The hero, who doesn't recognize their vulnerability, becomes an arrogant warrior. The sage, who denies their practical side, gets trapped in sterile theorizations. The caregiver, who rejects their own needs, ends up in resentment and exhaustion. The sixth Jungian paradox: your dominant archetype marks the path of your purpose, but only when you integrate its complementary shadow. What archetypal energy has accompanied you from the beginning? Which resonates most deeply with your essence? And more importantly, what aspects of that archetype have you rejected? What complementary qualities have you left in your shadow? Because there, in that creative tension between what you naturally express and what you've denied expressing, lies the definitive clue about your most authentic purpose. Synchronicity, that term Jung coined to describe meaningful coincidences that cannot be explained by conventional causality. Those moments when the external world seems to mysteriously align with your inner world. When you find exactly what you needed, though you didn't know you were looking for it. Jung discovered something surprising. These synchronic events tend to multiply when a person is in deeper contact with their unconscious. When they have begun to integrate their shadow, it's as if the universe responded to your internal coherence with an external coherence. The seventh Jungian paradox: the more you delve into your inner world, the more meaningful the outer world becomes. Have you noticed how certain themes, symbols, or situations seem to repeat in your life? How certain questions return again and again, dressed in different clothes. They aren't empty coincidences. They are the symbolic language of your path toward purpose. The invitation is to pay attention to those recurring dreams, to those people who appear bringing similar messages, to those situations that, although different in form, share a common essence. Because in that pattern, your purpose is speaking to you. What is the cost of ignoring your shadow? Of seeking your purpose only in the socially acceptable and comfortable? Jung described it with surgical precision. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate, neurosis, chronic anxiety, the persistent sensation of living a life that isn't yours, the inexplicable exhaustion from activities that should satisfy you, the feeling of playing a role assigned by others. All are symptoms of the same condition: disconnection from your totality. The 8th Jungian paradox. The more you try to be who you think you should be, the further you move from who you are called to be. Because your purpose isn't an external destination to conquer. It's an internal truth to liberate. It's no coincidence that midlife crises occur when a person has invested decades building a life that responds to external expectations, only to discover the inner emptiness that no external achievement can fill. The question isn't, what should I do with my life? Swing. But what part of me have I been denying that now asks for expression? Contrary to what is often believed, Jung didn't see authenticity as a state of constant perfection or enlightenment. He conceived it as an honest disposition toward one's own duality, a capacity to recognize both the light and the shadow, without completely identifying with either. The authentic person isn't one who has eliminated their darkness, but one who has learned to recognize it, to dialogue with it, to integrate its energy, instead of unconsciously projecting it. The 9th Jungian paradox. You can only be truly good when you recognize your capacity for evil. Because true goodness isn't born from naive innocence, but from conscious choice, after having recognized all the possibilities that dwell within you. True love doesn't arise from idealization, but from acceptance of the complete humanity of the other and of oneself. True purpose doesn't emerge from a fantasy of perfection, but from the integration of your entire history. The luminous and the shadowy, the celebrated and the rejected. And here we arrive at the essence. Your most authentic purpose will always require you to integrate apparently contradictory aspects. If you've made it this far, perhaps you expect a clear conclusion, a definitive answer on how to find your purpose through your shadow. But Jung understood that the journey toward oneself isn't linear, nor does it have an endpoint. It's a spiral that revisits familiar territories with an expanded consciousness each time. Work with the shadow doesn't end. It transforms. Because as you integrate certain aspects, others emerge from deeper layers. The 10th and final Jungian paradox. The process of individuation is never complete, and precisely in that incompleteness lies its beauty. Your purpose, seen from this perspective, isn't a fixed destination, but a moving horizon. It's not something you find once and for all, but something you rediscover in each new phase of your life. And now, As these words settle, I invite you to a final reflection. What aspect of your shadow has been asking for recognition? What message does it have for you about your path? If something shared today resonated with you, if you felt that shiver of recognition that arises when an external truth echoes with an internal truth, I invite you to take this reflection beyond these words. Share in the comments what aspect of your shadow you intuit might contain a key about your purpose. What rejected part of yourself deserves reintegration.